I'm from Palestine. With regard to the expose by Mr. Hassem, I just want to say a few words. In Europe, there is a lot of talk about Islamic radicalism. Can we not talk about Israeli radicalism? The Jews want the Palestinian children killed. Is this not a kind of extreme attitude? We are talking about a new vision with regard to the Islamic movements, whether or not we will treat Islam and Judaism in the same way. The region of the Arab Middle East is Islamic. Nobody has changed their attitude towards the Arab region and the kind of Islam preached there. How do you see an opportunity for resolving the Palestinian issue and the war there?
The question of Islamic movements for Hazem, but also if anyone wants to comment on it, it's a very important one. And here you can come in. You are not being a good Arab. You spoke very little, so you'll have a chance.
I actually kept within my 4 minutes.
Yes, and the question of migration, migration and migration policy, especially the outlook for, the change of perspective on the population, on the individual. After free people have to have a new perspective, and they have to be seen in a different perspective. I think this is within your question, and of course the Palestine question. Is there a new impetus for resolving the Palestine question? تفضل حسن.
طبعا اولا بما يتعلق بالشق المتعلق بالاسلاميين العراق اكيد تجربه سيئه.
With respect to the Muslims, there is some very negative experience. I mean, governance, there is corruption, there is lack of desire from the people to change those things. I will go back to what I said about the terror and the militant groups who are violent. They are armed and they're violent. Some of them are supported by some religious groupings. I myself am not a supporter of any of those, and I do not try to defend them here. I rather wanted to point out what these groups are doing, what the groups that are sort of subsidiaries to Al-Qaeda act, and how these reflect on regular people who have been subjected to terror for many, many years in a row. I didn't mean to tackle the issue of the Muslim Brotherhood. Mr. Dehaji was talking about the political parties in Iraq, and he said that there are some similarities among Islam parties around the Arab countries, that they were kind of similar. Our Egyptian colleague demonstrated the differences in the political moods. The Shia, who are supporters of the Dawa party, have been organized by the Muslim Brotherhood. But these are different topics. These are separate issues.
للسياسة الأوروبية مشان
However, let's go on with the migration policy and the European policy about migration. Do you want to say a few words?
It's a serious issue. Although I'm a bit of almost a libertarian on this issue, I can't fail to notice that when there was no demand for North African labor, or for that matter, for Mexican labor in the US because of recession, immigration basically began to recede. We saw that in Morocco. We've seen that in Mexico recently, which means that, in fact, when you have these flows of immigration, it's because there is a demand for work. You know, people are not abandoning their social networks in their villages in Morocco to go to the wilderness of societies they don't know anything about and to starve. They go there because they have opportunities to work, and there are employers to employ them. So, and we need to put ourselves in the shoes of of European politicians as well. You know, we have to be realistic and try to understand the issue from the other side, and we can understand why people under economic stress, they tend to scapegoat the new guys who come and find in their view find work. But in reality, we do know that migration is mostly based on the fact that there is demand for this labor. So there is, here we are in need of strong European leadership, and leadership is defined as the ability to go against your own people sometimes, to make the pedagogical efforts toward the European constituencies and to explain how it works economically and find humane ways of dealing with this issue. That's why I might shock someone, but the idea of quotas is not completely scandalous to me, because I do find that it's at least more humane way of dealing with migration, instead of seeing our brothers and sisters dying, drowning in the straits of Gibraltar.
I have عندي سؤال لك. نفس السؤال. بدي زيد عليه شغلة إذا ممكن. هل بتفكر
I want to add something else. Tunisian migrants will go back to their country, and other migrants will probably go back to their home countries after the revolution, and there will be a new relationship between migrants and their home countries. The question of migration has two perspectives. One is the European perspective. I would like to mention that migration flows from Eastern Europe to the western part amounts to many hundreds and thousands of people. So basically, we know what the attitude towards Tunisian migrants in Lampedusa are. And what is the difference between the first group and the second group? The difference is religion and culture. Europe does not fancy a flow of Islam migration flows towards Europe. We managed to exert some influence on this migration flow, I dare say, with respect to the south. Migration is a result of bad politics rather than economy only. On the other hand, there is no freedom. Apparently, those people did not enjoy freedom in their own countries. That's why they fled. I'm optimistic with respect to the South because we reached a moment in the revolution where we succeeded with some of our goals, and we managed to create some revolutionary and democratic consciousness. And we do believe that these people will come back with investments. I mean, Tunisians who are currently living abroad will bring investments as well. This is a new development. Let's be optimistic and let's hope that we have the same road to go. Let's not be scared with the civilization of Islam, because migration is also related to internal politics.
Of all this talk about post-Islamic phase, post-Islamism, the French were mainly, people like Olivier Roy have been talking about it for a long time, but in the latest issue of Foreign Affairs, there is even an article by Asif Bayat on this. And so how do you see this?
From the perspective of the GCC states and so on, the perception is that there's a lot of change ongoing within political Islam, and that there's a metamorphosis ongoing. Certain groups that we see today that are considered fundamentalists are likely to, from their perspective, split apart and to form new entities, while there might be an older shell that's operating. There's concern about how these movements might be manipulated by Saudi Arabia and or Iran, depending on the scenario. And also because of the resulting violence from some of the revolts in the region, there's concern about the rise of violent Islamic extremist groups perhaps from Bahrain, because of the violent crackdown there. That would be a Shiite-based terrorist group, like a Bahraini Hezbollah, if you will. And also possibly the emergence of something out of Libya, depending on which way that movement will go. Finally, I think it's important to point out what's going on in Saudi Arabia today vis-a-vis Iran, because of the competition between the two over what's ongoing in the region in terms of Islamic movements. And you're seeing them both become more active and more and rising rhetoric between them about who is really supposed to be capturing the attention and minds of the Islamist movements, as well as with the Saudi program of Dawah. So it's a work in progress.
But how does this affect Western policy?
Well, I think for Western policy,
Islam migration,
yeah, I understand.
Engagement with Islamists.
I think it's important to watch for the warnings and indicators that this type of phenomena that's going on in the core of the Middle East or the Near East and then out into North Africa, whether some of that debate and so on is being transplanted into Europe, and is it coming along with the heavy amounts of migration, or is it, there's already active groups that are in the Balkans or in Western Europe. How are they reacting to this? Is there a greater linkages between them, not only within Europe, but also going back to their linkages with groups within the Middle East itself? So it's an evolutionary moment for these groups.
Thank you.
Thank you.
سيد باسم، بس عن السؤال عن غير بالثورة بفكر الشباب عن الموضوع.
What has changed among the young people after the revolution? What was it that changed among the young people after the revolution?